Two thugs had just arrived at their hideout when they saw a gunman rushing toward them. The thug who had just stepped out of the car didn't even have time to react before he was sent to the afterlife. The other one, seeing that the situation was bad, immediately stomped on the gas and sped away. The man didn't stop shooting at the car, and the thug also pulled out his weapon. In a fit of rage, he immediately turned the car around and attacked the man head-on. The reason the man acted so ruthlessly toward the two thugs was that he wanted revenge for his family. The man, named Cash, used to be the most effective right-hand man under a local boss named WC. Because his sister's death dealt a heavy blow to his brother-in-law, Cash decided to wash his hands of the business and moved to live on a farm with his brother-in-law and niece. 2 years passed, and although his brother-in-law, Finney, had not completely overcome the pain of losing his wife, their life was quite happy, or at least could be considered carefree, until that day, when Cash took his niece, Lucy, to a fast food restaurant for lunch. While Cash stepped away to take a phone call, a group of thugs sat down next to Lucy. Seeing this, Cash immediately turned back. He was very familiar with this group of thugs. They were all henchmen of the boss WC. Not knowing what their intentions were, Cash told Lucy to go to the counter to eat some sweets, and he would come to find her after he was done. Then, he sat down to hear what their purpose was. WC had something to discuss with him. Not long after, Cash took Lucy back to the farm. At this time, Finney was still immersed in a drunken stupor. Cash went straight to the point and asked him why he mortgaged the farm to borrow money from WC. It turned out the group of thugs from earlier came because of that loan. It was clear they were putting pressure on him. Finney had no other choice, otherwise the farm could not be kept no matter what. Cash understood WC very well. Once she accepted a loan, it was very difficult to get the farm back. But at this moment, his brother-in-law Finney still held on to hope. He believed that he would definitely find a way to repay the debt and reclaim the farm. This farm was the only thing his sister had left behind. Cash couldn't stand by and watch it fall into WC's hands like that. So, he planned to go find WC to talk. At the same time, two addicts were trying to find weapons, hot goods, and targeted WC's opium production facility on the mountain. Their plan was good. They intended to hire some fully armed mercenaries to raid the place at night. But they didn't know how terrifying WC's ruthlessness was. One guy told the other to keep watch while he went to find a vantage point to strike. But just as he was carefully observing the situation, a cry of pain from his accomplice echoed from afar. He immediately ran to check the situation and was horrified to discover his accomplice had fallen into a trap and was impaled by steel spikes. Seeing the pursuers closing in, he turned to run but unfortunately stepped on a bear trap hidden in the ground. The next morning, Finney was helping his daughter with homework when WC's henchmen suddenly showed up at the door. Finney knew their purpose and understood that hiding was useless. So he opened the door. WC's thugs aggressively stormed in. Finney couldn't even finish his sentence before they started beating him immediately. His daughter beside him could only scream for them to stop. The lead thug, seeing this, ordered his subordinate to restrain Lucy. But Lucy's personality was exactly like her uncle's, extremely tough. She raised a small knife and stabbed the thug in the face. The thug flew into a rage, punched Lucy, and then roughly dragged both Lucy and her father outside. The lead thug pulled out a gun. Finney hurriedly begged the other party to spare him, but the thug ultimately pulled the trigger. Right at that moment, Cash had just returned from outside and saw the black car. He immediately sensed something was wrong and slammed on the accelerator. Rushing home, fortunately, the opponent only fired right next to Finney's ear and caused no other injuries. Cash understood the urgency of the problem. It seemed this matter had to be resolved immediately, otherwise, who knew what tricks the opponent would use next time? So he told Lucy to take good care of Finney, and he would be back in a few hours. When night fell, Cash's car entered WC's mansion. Since Cash had helped WC do many things in the past, she treated him quite politely. Cash asked WC straight out why she touched his family, and WC didn't hide it. She didn't want the farm or Cash's land. And she understood that Cash's alcoholic brother-in-law was incapable of repaying the loan. But she lent Finney the money anyway. The reason she did it was that she wanted Cash to come back and work for her. WC told Cash that she would assign him 3 missions. As long as Cash completed them smoothly, his brother-in-law's debt would be erased. Cash knew he had no other choice. So he emphasized once more, only these 3 tasks. After they were done, he would leave. WC kept her promise and agreed immediately. After Cash left, WC began interrogating the addict. Using words like vicious and ruthless to describe this woman seemed insufficient. WC never showed mercy to those who dared to challenge her. She gave the addict a chance, asking where his accomplices were. But the addict insisted he had no accomplices and simply wanted to get drugs for himself. Seeing the other party refuse to cooperate, WC lost patience. She picked up a pair of pliers from the side and cut off the man's thumb. After that, she called Cash. This would be his first mission. WC had sent henchmen to wait outside Cash's place. Then she ordered her juniors to throw the addict out in the middle of the street. Because WC knew well that this addict hadn't told the truth. So she told Cash and her juniors to follow the addict in the shadows. Sure enough, not long after, the addict got into a car. The two also started their car and followed. After seeing the car drive into a desolate house, Cash quietly approached. Just as predicted, he found the addict and his accomplices and heard them plotting to teach WC a lesson. Grasping the information, Cash immediately returned to the car, and the henchman called WC to report the current situation. Soon, a fully armed team arrived and raided the house. One person who slipped through the net tried to escape but was knocked down by Cash, who was waiting outside, using the butt of his gun. The henchman walked out and, without hesitation, fired his gun, sending the kid on his way. At the same time, Cash asked him why his own gun had no bullets. He had passed that damn test. It turned out all of this was WC testing Cash. The next day, Cash went to find his close friend. O used to be a henchman for WC as well but had a higher status and had successfully retired, washed his hands. Now he was a pastor. Through their conversation, Cash learned that his sister also used to be a henchman for WC but lost her life due to a drug overdose. At that time, Cash was doing a deal out of province so he couldn't attend his sister's funeral. This was a knot in Cash's heart. Therefore, not long after his sister died, he chose to retire. But O told him that everyone has to endure pain, including himself. But as long as Cash was willing to follow his conscience, he would eventually escape the terrible demon in his heart. He hoped Cash wouldn't isolate himself but would accept everything. Looking at Cash's face, clearly, O's words had an effect. That night when he got home, Cash received another phone call from WC. Early the next morning, Cash met Walker, a henchman of WC. Walker told Cash that another henchman named Salem had been secretly doing business on the side and had been discovered by WC. But WC didn't expose everything. Instead, she told Walker and Cash to support Salem in completing his final transaction. After that, they were to eliminate Salem and bring the money back. Just as he finished speaking, Salem appeared in his car. But at this moment, he didn't know this trip was a one-way street. Soon the car arrived at the agreed trading location. Cash began helping Salem move the hot goods, weapons, out of the car. But just as the transaction was about to start, Walker suddenly opened fire and took down Salem. Cash immediately questioned the action. Walker justified it by saying Salem seemed to have discovered something, and eliminating him was necessary to ensure the job was done cleanly as Cash had requested. Cash angrily realized this action had ruined the transaction. But since it was already done, holding Walker accountable was useless. So Cash rummaged through the car for a plastic tarp to dispose of the body first. But just as they wrapped up the body, Salem's phone suddenly rang. Cash told Walker to check the phone first. It turned out the message was from the buyer, and they would arrive in 5 minutes. Cash texted back saying Salem couldn't make it, but his brothers would take his place. Just as they finished arranging everything, the buyer's car arrived on time. Honestly speaking, those doing business in this industry have an extremely keen sense of smell. Because the buyer, upon stepping out of the car, asked why Salem didn't come. Receiving news only 5 minutes before the meeting that Salem couldn't be present was clearly unusual. But right at this moment, the buyer suddenly noticed bloodstains on the tip of Cash's shoe. The buyer immediately drew his gun and ordered everyone to stand still. He said this was a big surprise and assumed no one wanted to die that afternoon or have to explain to WC why everything turned into a bloodbath. Instead, he suggested everyone focus on the main business, demanding Cash and Walker hand over the money immediately. The buyer turned out to be an old fox. But no matter how much of a fox you are, in the face of true strength, the result is just being crushed. Soon, the opposing side had only one gunman left. The young kid, seeing his side was all dead, fired while quickly running into the small woods nearby. Cash immediately chased after him and fired a shot, taking down the fleeing kid. Cash warned him not to throw away the goods and threatened to shoot. He offered 2 choices. 1. He kills the kid and takes both the money and goods back, risking completing this rotten mission. 2. Based on his personal kindness, he proposed a deal. The kid takes the hot goods, and Cash takes the money so both sides survive as intended. Realizing this was a beneficial deal, the kid quickly agreed. Clearly, for the young kid, this deal was extremely profitable. Just like that, the 2 sides completed the transaction in an unusual way. On the way back, the car broke down and stalled in the middle of the road because it had been shot. Cash helplessly called his brother-in-law to pick him up. Back home, Cash knew he couldn't hide it anymore, so he recounted the agreement reached with WC to his brother-in-law. Although Finney felt some resistance in his heart, he had no better way. However, he reminded Cash, "What if WC doesn't keep her word?" Cash had already thought of this long ago. So, on a sunny afternoon, Cash made an appointment with the local deputy sheriff in the suburban forest because he prepared to tell him all the crimes WC had committed. Everyone knows police need evidence to solve cases, so relying solely on Cash's words was completely unconvincing. Cash agreed that he would provide information to the deputy sheriff on the condition of absolute secrecy regarding his existence and protection for his family. The deputy sheriff agreed and said he would contact friends at the prosecutor's office to determine the necessary evidence to charge WC. But Cash added a condition that what he wanted was for WC to disappear completely. Clearly, Cash wanted WC to disappear even more thoroughly than the deputy sheriff did. So the two happily reached an agreement. That night, the deputy sheriff called Cash, Jack, to tell him to mark the location of WC's weapon production factory for them. Only then would they have enough grounds to arrest WC. But just as Cash was talking on the phone with the deputy sheriff, WC's henchman came to his door again, this time to take Cash to join their party. Just stepping in, Cash discovered that everyone here was basically a notorious arms dealer. WC first boasted about her son in front of everyone, then led everyone into the main hall inside. While everyone was still immersed in their revelry, henchmen suddenly pushed a person in from the side door. They lifted the white cloth covering him, and the room immediately filled with whispers. It turned out the person being pushed in was the deputy sheriff, the one who had just reached an agreement with Cash not long ago. Seeing this scene, Cash's expression changed completely. The henchman slowly pushed out a metal cart containing all sorts of torture instruments. WC told the henchman to combine them freely and improvise. Then, two henchmen took turns picking up a sledgehammer from the tray and brought it straight down on the deputy sheriff's legs. This scene made even the terrible arms dealers around them reveal expressions of discomfort. But WC had no intention of letting him go so easily. She took out a box cutter and a saw from the toolbox nearby. At this point, Cash finally couldn't take it anymore. He slowly stepped forward and said everyone had had enough. He hoped WC would agree to let him take the deputy sheriff into the forest to dispose of him cleanly and thoroughly. This woman was truly too cruel. Initially, Cash wanted to find a chance to rescue the deputy sheriff, but now it was completely hopeless. Next, Cash told WC that he had completed the 3 tasks she required, and it was time for him to leave. WC sneered, saying that stopping was for her to decide. Then WC threatened Cash by mentioning his niece, his alcoholic brother-in-law, and even his sister's remains buried at the farm, forcing Cash to admit he understood the situation. Clearly, This she-devil wanted to use Cash's brother-in-law and niece to threaten him. But ironically, Cash had no other way. Early the next morning, WC just woke up when a henchman walked into her room. It turned out the henchman had decrypted the deputy sheriff's phone and found the chat log between him and Cash. At noon, Finney had just attended a baptism ceremony by the pastor with his daughter. Just as they intended to drive home, they were blocked by WC's henchmen waiting for them. Finney realized something was wrong and pulled his daughter, preparing to run, but both escape routes were blocked by WC's henchmen. Then Finney began to struggle with this group of thugs. As the proverb goes, 2 hands can't fight 4 hands. How could Finney alone be a match for a whole crowd? He was quickly knocked to the ground and attacked with sticks. These bastards even laid hands on Lucy when she tried to intervene. Fortunately, OY arrived in time, pushed down a thug, and rescued Lucy from another. Immediately, several guns were pointed straight at O's head, thanks to O's status as a pastor. These men did not act, but Finney beside him was not so lucky. By this time, he basically had no signs of life left. Receiving the news, Cash rushed to the hospital, but he only arrived in time to see that Finney had lost his life. His sister was dead, and now his brother-in-law died right before his eyes. This was unacceptable to him. WC's actions had completely provoked this strong man. You can touch me, but if you touch my family, you must die. Clearly, what followed would be a spectacular revenge. On the other side, at WC's mansion, a police officer entered. This person was the local sheriff. While chatting with WC, he revealed everything. It turned out these two were on the same side. Even the information about the deputy sheriff investigating WC was revealed to WC by him. Clearly, this man, for money, had thrown away all justice and fairness. In another development, Cash entrusted Lucy to O because the things he was about to do were extremely dangerous. And he didn't want Lucy to risk her life with him. And O understood Cash. He knew what kind of person he was. So he cheerfully accepted Cash's request. And Cash had a plan. He attached a tracking device to a WC henchman's car. He set his first target on 2 of the most active henchmen under WC. Waiting until these 2 stopped their car, Cash quickly grabbed a gun, rushed in, and took down one who had just stepped out. The other one, seeing the dangerous situation, stepped on the gas and sped off. The weapon in Cash's hand didn't stop firing bullets. But surprisingly, the fleeing thug turned the car around and attacked Cash. Cash was thrown and knocked unconscious. A while later, Cash woke up and saw that both thugs were dead, so he hurriedly left the scene. But just as he prepared to start his car to leave, he discovered his car keys had fallen at the scene during the fight. Seeing WC's reinforcements arriving, Cash helplessly chose to leave first to plan for the long term. Not long after, WC arrived at the crime scene with the police. Very quickly after that, a large group of WC's henchmen stormed O's house. Because they knew Cash was hiding Lucy there, they demanded O hand Lucy over. Lucy, hiding in the ceiling, heard the sound of O being beaten, unable to endure it anymore. Lucy rushed downstairs. Just like that, Lucy was taken away by the thugs. Not long after, Cash arrived at O's house and saw O preparing weapons in the basement. Seeing O's bruised face, Cash knew Lucy had definitely met with trouble. Seeing O preparing weapons, Cash understood that O couldn't take it anymore either. Clearly, the two stood on the same battle line. After that, the two went to the law firm where WC's son worked. After subduing all security forces, they successfully kidnapped WC's son, named Zach. If WC wanted to use Cash's family to trade for Lucy's life, why shouldn't they change the thinking? Use her son's life to exchange for Lucy. The two took the son to the suburbs. Cash called WC demanding a hostage exchange and stated a location. But this woman was truly too ruthless. She didn't care about her son, while Cash cared about his niece. Cash helplessly had to follow the other party's words. Before the appointed time, Cash arrived outside the mansion to hide. WC took her personal safety very seriously. So around the villa, there were patrols equipped with full weapons everywhere. At the same time, Cash discovered bear traps in the ground. An idea immediately popped into his head. And Lucy, locked in the house, was also trying to save herself. Taking advantage of the guard looking out the window, Lucy began to inch bit by bit toward the fireplace behind her. At the same time, O also brought WC's son to the mansion to prevent the opponent from playing tricks. He restrained the man right on the hood of the car. Doing so not only helped shield him from bullets but also made the thugs hesitant to open fire. While the two were negotiating, a soldier discovered movement around the villa, so he went directly to check the situation. But the next second, Cash snapped a bear trap straight onto his head. Meanwhile, Lucy had successfully moved next to the fireplace and began rubbing the rope against the handle of the fireplace cover. The guard focused all his attention out the window, completely failing to realize Lucy had freed herself. When the guard turned around, the rifle in Lucy's hands was pointed straight at him. This gunshot alerted everyone, and at the same time, the thugs began to attack O, but due to the hostage position, they didn't dare fire freely, so the threat to O wasn't too great. Seeing this situation, WC sent henchmen to find a way to circle around back for a sneak attack. But O, being an old gangster, quickly discovered their intent. Simultaneously, another henchman rushed into the house with a gun. As a result, while searching the room, he was attacked by Lucy again. After that, he chased in the direction Lucy fled. By this time, Cash outside had finished cleaning up all the patrols and had snuck inside the villa. At the same time, O was still fighting with many thugs. The opponent attacked O from many different angles. Z on the car had also struggled to untie the ropes. Then, under WC's covering fire, he quickly rushed to the side of a fallen thug, conveniently picking up his weapon. He intended to confront O, taking advantage of O reloading. He shot O in the arm, and O also reacted quickly, shooting back and hitting Z in the thigh. Z fell to the ground in pain. This made WC standing nearby extremely worried. Z was shot and in a panic. He dragged his painful body, stumbling to flee into the sunken ground nearby. He thought he had escaped danger. Unexpectedly, two fierce hunting dogs suddenly appeared beside him. Z was immediately terrified to the extreme, and the next second, WC nearby heard her son's tragic scream. So she fired back while quickly moving toward her son. At the same time, O also began to confront the final thug. The two fired several shots consecutively at each other and finally both were hit and collapsed to the ground. At this moment, WC finally reached her son's side but saw a cruel scene. So she immediately fired to drive the two hunting dogs away. Then she went to her son's side. But by this time, Z, Jack, had been severely bitten by the hunting dogs and could not survive. WC painfully caressed her son, but everything was too late. Simultaneously, the girl in the villa also fired the last bullet. The thug hurriedly chased down but ran straight into Cash, who had just snuck into the villa. The two immediately opened fire wildly at each other's position. After a while, the gunfire stopped, so the thug pointed his gun and crept toward Cash. But he only saw an empty pistol on the floor. Cash had vanished without a trace. But just as the thug was intently searching, Cash suddenly rushed out from the side, tackling the unprepared thug. Then the two began a hand-to-hand fight. Thanks to his durable physical strength, Cash quickly wrestled the thug down. The thug, seeing he was no match, pulled out a knife. The thug was finally sent to the afterlife by Cash. But at the same time, WC also blamed her son's death entirely on Cash. So she immediately took a gun and stormed into the villa. At this time, Cash was preparing to take his niece away when he bumped into WC rushing in. Without a word, the two sides started a gunfight. Cash was unfortunately hit. Seeing WC approaching step by step, Cash told his niece to run away quickly. At the same time, he was hit by another bullet from WC. Lucy took advantage of WC reloading to drag her uncle behind cover. At this time, WC launched another attack. Cash could only advise his niece to leave while firing back. But by now he was very heavily injured. His reaction speed was no longer as fast as before. And finally, he was hit by WC's bullet again. This time he completely had no strength to resist. His niece's timely stab not only saved her uncle but also completely eliminated a major threat to this city. And WC certainly never expected that she would have to say goodbye in this way in the end. The end of the story. O recovered from his wounds and returned to the church he had longed for. And Lucy also returned to the farm with her uncle to start a new, simple, and happy life. The value of a movie lies in its reputation, while the value of a movie review lies in the feeling. The story ends here today. Thank you for watching. What do you think about this movie? Please comment below.